Hi guys, and welcome back. In this video, we will be doing a deep dive into the Japan earthquake and tsunami case study. There are three earthquakes that you need to know about for the unit on tectonic hazards: the Nepal earthquakes of 2015, the Japanese earthquake and tsunami of 2011, and the Haiti earthquake of 2010. It's essential for you to know these case studies well, especially for the longer exam questions that require case study knowledge. I have already done the Nepal earthquake case study video and will be uploading the Haiti earthquake video shortly. These can be found in the case study playlist in the description below. Feel free to send me any questions that you may have regarding the case studies in the comment section below. Okay, let's get started. What caused the earthquake and tsunami in Japan in 2011? So Japan lies on a convergent destructive plate boundary, and a convergent destructive plate boundary here is referring to a boundary where you have two plates converging or moving towards each other. Now, destructive here implies that one of the plates is an oceanic plate and the other one is a continental plate. And ordinarily, when you have two plates, one being continental and the other being oceanic, converging, then the oceanic plate, which is heavier and denser, will sink or subduct below the continental plate. Now, that is what happened here in Japan. If you look at the diagram here, you have the Pacific plate, which is the water plate or the oceanic plate, and as you can see, it's subducting below the North American plate, which is the continental plate. But in this case, the Pacific plate actually subducted below the Okhotsk plate, which is a portion of the Eurasian plate. Now, the subduction process, as you can imagine, is not smooth at all and will create a lot of friction. And sometimes the plates will get stuck, and that is what happened in this case, of course. And as they get stuck, pressure will build up over time. And then eventually, when that built up pressure exceeds the frictional force, the plates will slip suddenly, releasing a massive amount of energy that sends seismic waves to the Earth's surface. That now causes a megathrust earthquake. And in the case of the Japanese earthquake here of 2011, the earthquake lasted 6 minutes. Now, 6 minutes is a substantial length of time, especially considering that another earthquake that took place in Japan, in a place called Kobe in Japan, lasted only 20 seconds but wreaked devastating damage. So 6 minutes is quite a long time. The epicenter of the earthquake. So the epicenter is the point directly above the focus on the ground, and the focus is the place or is a point below the ground where the rock gives way. And then the epicenter is so you have the most shaking at the focus, and then the epicenter is the point directly above it on the surface. So that would be the place that has the most shaking on the surface, or the place that receives the bulk of that mega thrust, if you like. So the epicenter was 70 kilometers off the Sendai beach coast. And the Sendai beach coast is the one that was affected the most. And, the epicenter was 70 kilometers away from it. However, there's a tsunami that we're going to be talking about, which then changed the whole scenario, because if it was just 70 kilometers off, on land, it would not have had as much devastating damage as it did due to the creation of that tsunami. So the focus of the earthquake was only 30 kilometers deep. Now, that is classified or considered to be a very shallow focus. Now, it's obvious that if we have a deeper focus, then the earthquake will not have that much power, because it will take a longer time for the seismic waves to reach the ground or to reach the epicenter. However, if it's shallow, then the waves, the seismic waves, will get to the surface or to the epicenter a lot faster, and because of that they are likely to be still very strong and powerful. They'll not have lost as much energy as if the focus were a lot deeper. Now, for context purposes, a shallow focus ranges from 0 to 70 kilometers. This one here was half that. Then an intermediate focus is 70 to 300 kilometers deep, and then a deep focus is more than 300 kilometers deep. So that just tells you or explains how shallow that focus was. Okay, so moving on to the tsunami. So the mega thrust that was caused by the sudden movement at the focus of the earthquake, which then led to sudden upward movement, led to vertical displacement of the sea floor. So the epicenter was the sea floor 70 kilometers away off, 70 kilometers off the Sendai Beach coast. And when the sea floor was displaced, it generated a powerful tsunami that radiated outwards from that epicenter 70 kilometers away and started, the tsunami started now moving towards land. Now, when water is displaced in the open ocean, the wave height is usually less than 1 meter, because the water is really deep out in the ocean, out in the open water, and therefore when the ocean floor is disturbed, or when there is that mega thrust below it and it's displaced, then the movement is not likely to create such a big wave. However, that wave, as the wave travels, it gains speed and energy, and then as it comes towards the land, it begins to become a lot higher. Now, out in the open water, those waves can reach speeds of up to 900 kilometers an hour. That is pretty fast, because if you think about such a wave traveling at that kind of speed towards a coast that is only 70 kilometers away, it's going to reach there very quickly. And what happens as the waves near the coast is that they will slow down due to an increase in height. So slow down, but increase in height. So from that 1 meter out in the open sea or in the open water to around 30 meters high as it reaches the coast. And the reason for that is because the ocean depth becomes shallower as you near the coastline. So that depth that is lost on the under part of the wave that is below the water is gained on the upper part of the wave above the surface. So you end up with a 30-meter wave in this particular case, and that kind of wave has the potential to push many kilometers inland, destroying everything in its path. And this is what unfortunately happened on the Sendai beach coast. There were warnings in the Pacific Ocean that warned Japan and its neighbors of the impending tsunami. Now, of course, the effectiveness of such warnings will depend on the size of the tsunami and the distance from of its epicenter from the land. Now, in this particular case, the size of the tsunami was quite large, because you have a 30-meter high tsunami, and then it's traveling while in the open water in speeds in excess of 900 kilometers an hour. So it's going to eat up that distance between the epicenter and the land very quickly. So it will reach there very fast. So even where people are warned, they may not have sufficient time to evacuate the area. And this unfortunately can lead to a lot of damage, to a coastal area. Okay. What were the impacts of the earthquake and tsunami of March 2011 in Japan? So these have been categorized here under primary impacts and secondary impacts. So primary impacts are those that are immediate. and they occur as a direct result of the earthquake. So they are caused by the shaking that is the result of that earthquake. Then we have secondary impacts on the other side, and these are indirect consequences that occur after the main event. So they occur after the earthquake, and a lot of these were caused by the tsunami, because the tsunami was an indirect impact of the earthquake. The shaking is what led to the tsunami, and then the tsunami created its own damage, so to speak, really. Okay, so if we start off on the primary impact side, we will talk through them because these are impacts that we could use in a debate within an 8-mark question. So we will provide some kind of reasoning and context behind each of the impacts. So we will start off with the cost of damage. So the total economic cost was valued at 235 billion US dollars. Now that made it the costliest natural disaster in world history. Now, if we were to compare that to Nepal, when we were talking about the Nepal earthquake, we said that the cost of reconstruction was $7 billion. Now, that's a big difference when you compare 7 billion to 235 billion. So Japan suffered a lot more costs in terms of damage. Damage in terms of cost, rather. Now, is that because Japan was not well prepared? No, it's not. The reason they suffered such damage is that the earthquake was followed by a tsunami, and the tsunami therefore caused a lot more damage. In Nepal, it was just an earthquake on its own. There was no tsunami. The tsunamis normally are moving, like we said, at speeds sometimes up to and in excess of 900 kilometers an hour. And therefore, the potential for destruction is a lot higher. And then there's a wall of water that is 30 meters high. So there's a lot more potential for damage with tsunamis compared to earthquakes on their own. Furthermore, if we are discussing the kind of infrastructure rather and buildings that are in Japan. Japan is a HIC, so it means that the buildings there will cost a lot more, will be valued at a lot more than the buildings that would be in a country that is LIC, that like Nepal. And that would mean that there's a differential, there's a cost differential. Okay, and if we also are talking about buildings in Japan, they are likely to be reinforced to withstand earthquakes, and therefore the kind of material that is used to build them is also going to cost a lot more. Then there's a lot more infrastructure as well. There are roads that are better built, there are bridges as well. There's a lot more infrastructure that will cost a lot more money. So that will explain the difference in cost between the HICs and the LICs. Then there was serious damage to buildings, roads, bridges, railway infrastructure, including 332,395 buildings and 2,126 roads. So that is what we were mentioning really when we were talking about this cost of damage here. Over 332,000 buildings were damaged or destroyed. I think we are repeating ourselves there. 300 hospitals were damaged or destroyed. Now that was problematic, obviously, because with the number of casualties and injuries, this was unfortunate as well, because it means that these people could not get urgent medical attention in the area immediate to the to where the near Sendai anyway, so where the tsunami affected the most. So we've talked about this. I don't know why I repeated that there. I really do apologize. And then one dam collapsed, impacting water supply and HEP generation. So a dam collapsing here, obviously, water supply, that's not great. And then also HEP here refers to hydroelectric power generation. So that normally is the use of water from a dam to generate electricity. Now, if there is no electricity, it means that it's not only a social impact, but it's also an economic impact, because businesses are not likely to be able to operate when there are power outages. Okay, so that there those there are the primary impacts, and now we'll move on to the secondary impacts. So these were what were caused by the tsunami. So over 15,894 deaths, unfortunately, including several thousand victims that were never recovered. Now, talking about this, now this is double the number of people that died in, not double really, but if we compare this number of deaths rather to Nepal was 9,000. So Japan had a lot more deaths, and this could be put down to the fact that it was a tsunami and not just an earthquake on its own. Then there were 26,000 people, 26,152 people that were injured. Then there was a meltdown of 3 reactors at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant due to flooding of the cooling systems. This led to radiation releases and evacuation zones. Now, those nuclear power plants are very radioactive. And therefore, if there is radiation release, it can affect people. And so people had to be evacuated from those areas as well. So that was a secondary impact. Then long time taken to clear debris and rebuild disrupted businesses and schools. Now, this cannot just be businesses and schools. Of course, we are talking about a lot more. We are talking about things like hospitals as well. So it's a lot more infrastructure and facilities that would be discussed here in an 8-mark question. Then over 130,000 people were displaced, leaving them homeless and forced to live in temporary housing. Other people were left unemployed for a long period of time. So this earthquake, followed by a tsunami, wreaked a lot of damage in a country that is a high-income country. Ordinarily, there wouldn't be as much damage, but the problem here was the main determining factor in terms of the difference or the differential here was a tsunami. Okay, so on to the exemplar exam questions here. So we have 3 questions. The first one is an explain 4-mark question. So explain how earthquakes can cause tsunamis. So if you go back to the slide on the megathrust caused by the earthquake, the displacement of the water, then you'd be able to answer that 4-mark question. Now, because it's 4 marks, then you need to write 4 developments. So an initial explanation or reason, and then 3 developments after that. Then the second question here is to suggest 2 reasons why so many deaths occurred in Japan following the earthquake and the tsunami. So that then also you can get from the previous slide, and discuss that. So for each of the reasons that you're going to give, then you will have to explain. Okay, so a lot of times we forget to explain, so let's not forget to explain so that we can get the full marks. If it's just the reasons without an explanation, it's half the marks lost. So there has to be an explanation. Okay, then moving on to C, assess the importance of primary and secondary impacts of either volcanoes or earthquakes in a named developed country. And that is an 8-mark question. And that is what you would be discussing using these points here that we have just talked through. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So how does Japan prepare and protect against earthquakes? Earthquakes cannot be predicted. Now, if we think about the process that leads to an earthquake, we did mention that it's a buildup of pressure below the ground over a long period of time, and that pressure is released suddenly and without notice. So it's very difficult. I mean, it's really nigh on impossible to predict earthquakes. So the only thing that countries can do is to prepare and protect against them. Now, Japan has the 5th largest economy in the world by GDP in 2025. So these are recent stats, and they are also true of the time when the earthquake happened in 2011, in that Japan even then was a wealthy nation. So they are HIC. So they have the ability to spend significant amounts of money to mitigate against the effects of earthquakes and tsunamis. So what are the things that they do then? For earthquakes, they will construct earthquake-proof buildings. And Japan has a strict building code, strict building codes, which require building designs that have been reinforced concrete, steel frames, and dampers, and have seismic isolation to withstand and absorb shaking. So if they have dampers, they are going to absorb that shaking from the earthquake. In fact, some descriptions say that the buildings sometimes will sway or swing, in tandem with the earthquake, and therefore do not remain as a rigid structure which can then easily collapse. So the buildings are built to a very good standard or very high standard where earthquakes are concerned. So they are earthquake ready. But we could also argue that if there is a tsunami, then a tsunami is not likely to, a tsunami is likely to destroy such a building anyway, because the building has been constructed to mitigate against the impact of an earthquake and not necessarily a tsunami. Now, you can also reinforce it, obviously, to try and withstand the movement of the water. But if you have a tsunami wave that is coming in at a very high speed, like we said, 900 kilometers an hour, then that can still cause substantial damage to such a building. So, I'm just trying to provide counter arguments here that can be used in an 8-mark question. But on the whole, or overall, the money that Japan has spent in reinforcing their buildings is very, very significant in mitigating the effects of earthquakes. So this is really, really important, and it's really, really good. Then the second thing that they do is earthquake drills and emergency kits, and providing emergency kits. So as you can see here, this is an earthquake drill at a school. So students here are being taught about what to do in the event of an earthquake. Now, we know that when there's an earthquake, it's normally the buildings that are likely to injure people as they collapse. So if somebody then takes refuge below a table, then they will have something that is at least giving them some form of protection at the top here from any debris that may fall from the ceiling or from above. So these earthquake drills are really, really important in educating the public and getting them to know what to do, so that if there is an earthquake, they can respond accordingly and in an orderly fashion. Because sometimes if there is a disaster taking place and people have not been trained on what to do, then they might tend to try to evacuate the building, or try to they might get very frantic, and because they get frantic, then there is likely to be a lot more injury. So to reinforce preparedness and to ensure a coordinated response, so people are encouraged to take emergency kits to the drill points. So when there is an earthquake drill, you're encouraged to bring your emergency kit as well, so that if there are any people that are injured, then those emergency kits can be used. Then the third thing that they do is that they build tsunami walls. Now, these are 10 meters or more in height. Now, let's think about that for a second. When we talked about the tsunami, we said that it was a wall of 10, not 10, but 30-meter high water. So the tsunamis are really, really difficult to deal with, because if you're building a wall, it's difficult to build a wall that is 30 meters high. So these ones here are 10 meters or more in height, obviously. It does say that. But at the end of the day, this is really, really good protection from tsunamis and storm surges if they were to get one. But then in the case of a really, really large tsunami, they can still sometimes suffer damage. Okay, but this is good. I'm not being critical of it. I'm just giving counterpoints here that can be used in a debate within an 8-mark question. So these are a physical barrier. They prevent or reduce the impact of tsunami waves on coastal communities and infrastructure. Approximately 400 kilometers of walls have been constructed along the coastline. Now that is a lot of concrete and walls that you have, concrete for walls along a coastline, 400 kilometers of coastline. And that brings you back to the GDP of the country, which is really high. So a rich country, HIC, and can afford that. So for the LICs, that's unlikely. So if you are arguing HIC versus LIC, then you would argue here that Japan are a lot better prepared, even with the buildings and possibly the arguably rather the earthquake drills and the emergency kits. Then we have a very high-tech, so to speak, train network in Japan. So it's equipped with seismic sensors to monitor ground motion. And when seismic activity is detected, immediate emergency stop signals are sent to trains within seconds. Now, when I read up about this, it said that it's 2 seconds response time. So the trains are going to stop within 2 seconds of an earthquake. So the power will be cut off and they will stop. Now, that is really important because it will reduce the risk of derailment by the trains and therefore injury. Because if they derail and they crash, then that is more injury and more devastation that is going to take place. So if they just stop, then that is a lot safer, so to speak. Then the last thing that they do is to make sure that they have very clearly marked evacuation routes and that there are designated earthquake shelters. So in the case of people that are either in areas where they need to take cover, then they can go to the evacuation centers, to the shelters, sorry, and they can be in a building that is equipped with the technology that can protect them from the earthquake or from the damage that may be caused to buildings by earthquakes. Okay, so to the exemplar exam question here, and again, this is an 8-mark question, and this is to suggest, sorry, this should not say suggest, this should say evaluate the effectiveness of the management of a volcano or earthquake case study, earthquake hazard in a developed country. I do apologize. So this suggest here should not be in the question. So it should say evaluate the effectiveness of the management of a volcano or earthquake hazard in a developed country. So that would be you arguing these points here that we have just discussed. And because you're using 2 sides of the argument, that is why I was trying to provide some kind of counter arguments or criticisms to the way Japan prepares and protects. Not saying that it's not effective, because it's extremely effective, but trying to get you points that you can argue within an 8-mark question context. And also, when arguing this question, you're also, comparing Japan to either Haiti or Nepal. So in so doing, you have a lot of comparison to make. You're making counter arguments against these ways that have been used to protect the country against earthquakes and tsunamis. And you're also comparing the way they protect their country in Japan to the way countries in that are LIC rather protect their own countries or prepare and protect against earthquakes. So those countries for comparison being Haiti and Nepal. Okay. That brings us to the end of this video on the Japanese earthquake and tsunami case study. I hope that you had found the information useful. The Nepal earthquake video has already been uploaded and is linked in the description below. The Haiti earthquake video will also be uploaded shortly and will be available in the description below, as well as the case study playlist. Feel free to send me any questions regarding the case studies in the comment section below. All the best and see you again soon.